Hi, everybody. My name is Toni and Marcolini. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. I have a Grammy Award-winning musician with me today, George Whitty. Welcome, George, if I can call you George.
You can absolutely call me George, and it's a pleasure to join you here.
So I'm pretty excited. I mean, I've never interviewed a Grammy winner, some Emmy winners, but never a Grammy winner. So, I mean, I have to jump to that before I do anything else and say and ask, so where are you when you find out you're nominated for your first Grammy?
Well, it's funny that you should ask because I also won an Emmy, and that one was the strangest one of them all because I had been writing music for daytime dramas, we're going to call them, not soap operas, but daytime dramas for many years. We had been nominated many times. I worked for three different ones. I did One Life to Live. I did uh, Another World, and I did one other one, and we never won. And
Big New York soaps, New York
yeah,
big soap. Yeah.
As the World Turns was the one that I actually wrote the most for, and they were great gigs. And then I was working on, I think it was Another World or something like that. And we got nominated, but at that point, the soap had moved to where it was internet only, with this weird kind of post life after broadcast. And we were nominated, and I sort of assumed, well, there's no way they're going to give it to us. They got to try to inflate the ones that are still struggling to stay on the air. So I didn't even bother to tune in, to the ceremony or whatever. And just as I was going to bed, I'm flipping through Facebook and it's like, hey, isn't that Brian, whatever his name was, the music supervisor, wearing a tuxedo and holding an Emmy award? And that's how I figured out that we had finally won, one of those. It was kind of the same team of people all along. And the first Grammy that I participated in was a Chaka Khan record from 1991, I think it was, called The Woman I Am.
I
And
remember them.
what's that?
I remember them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and She won for Best R&B Vocal Performance or something like that. Don't remember where I was when I heard about that, but a friend of mine and I produced a couple tracks for that. And then there was kind of a succession of them. I worked with this really great jazz group called the Brecker Brothers and produced some stuff for them. And then I produced two records for Michael Brecker that each won Grammys. And then one or two for Randy Brecker that won Grammys as well. Um,
So do you ever actually go attend the ceremony or do you just
You
get
know
too
what?
nerve-wracking?
We thought about going. I was nominated again. I produced a record for Randy Brecker and Eric Marienthal, the great saxophonist, 3 years ago, and we got nominated. And those things you don't see, what's it called now? Best Contemporary Jazz Instrumental Performance or something like that. And that's not like they don't put us on after Taylor Swift or whatever. There's a whole separate,
Right.
awards ceremony that we call the Kids Table Grammys that is sort of the smaller, best spoken word and stuff like that. And I wanted to go to that one and I wanted to bring my girlfriend and my kids, but the tickets were 750 each. So to do all that would have cost 3 grand. And, if it was the adults table Grammys, maybe you can see spending 3 grand, but not to do the kids table one. So, we are hoping, I personally am hoping that this record that I made with Ellis Hall, that we can at least manage to get Ellis nominated, because there is no better R&B vocalist, no better soul vocalist out there, and there hasn't been for decades, than
Well,
Ellis Hall.
let's jump right into that then. I mean, let's talk
Okay.
about how you wound up collaborating.
That's a super interesting story that of all things, that I never expected. You know, I grew up in a little town called Coos Bay, Oregon. Great little place. It's on the coast, kind of a fishing and lumber industry town that's transitioning into sort of a nice place to retire if you're from California.
Mm.
But there's not a lot of jazz music there. There was zero R&B music there, but somehow all that stuff found me through records, stuff that the radio was playing and so forth. Um, and Ellis had been managed for a while and has sort of been in cahoots with this manager named Alec Burfield, who lives now in Bandon, Oregon, which is right next to Coos Bay. And I had been a huge admirer of Ellis's since the first time I saw him. I saw him with Tower of Power in New York City in Ellis and I have calculated it must have been 1988. And I always went to go see Tower anytime they were playing. I still think it's the best band, surely the slamminest funk band. You could argue Sly and the Family Stone, Earth, Wind and Fire, but Tower is in that company. And boy, I loved the way they sounded. And I would always go see them at the Bottom Line in New York. And they kind of had rotated out of the original singers that were on the first few records, and so I had seen it with a couple other singers, and then I go one day, and there's this dude, this blind dude sitting in playing the keyboards and singing, and to me, it just elevated it to this completely other level. And I'm sitting there, and it was always a bucket list item of mine to work with Tower, and I have a little story about the time they called me to work with them too. But Ellis, now it was like almost like if you got Stevie Wonder to sing with Tower of Power or something like that. And I made a little mental note that, I got to work with that guy at some point. And the years go on, and, Ellis is kind of doing his thing. I'm doing my thing. My thing was maybe a little more jazz oriented, although I was producing a lot of R&B stuff for various different artists. Um, and then this guy, Alec Burfield from Bandon, Oregon, of all places, gets this idea that Ellis and I should collaborate on a song, a remake. And this was between Alec and his brother, who's kind of a lawyer involved in Ukraine issues, that we might remake a tune that translated roughly from Ukrainian to English translates into Hug Me. And it's a big power ballad kind of thing, the way that the original artist Slava Varkachuk did it over there. And to me, when Alec got in touch with me about this, I was like, this is a chance to work with Ellis Hall. I don't even need any money. We're going to do it. We're going to donate the proceeds to Ukrainian relief. And let me get at this piece of music. So I kind of reimagined it as like a big cinematic kind of Peter Gabriel thing.
Mm.
We sent it to Ellis. Ellis loved it. He put his stuff on it. And from there on, it was just really such a killer collaboration. I would send him stuff that cracked him up. He would send me back vocal tracks, guitar tracks, organ tracks that cracked me up, and we would laugh and it would elevate higher until we ended up with, I think, just a really classic, great soul record.
Yeah, I mean, you have the is it Die Living, I believe is the title of it. Um,
Yeah, which
no-
is shocking everybody by climbing the radio playlist.
yeah.
For a little independent record like this, I have to laugh when I look at it. We made it onto the independent label radio playlist, and we were like number 49. We were, woohoo, this is so great. And then next thing you know, we're on the actual top 200. So you look at the thing, we were at 126 last week, and it's like we're at 126, and poor old Taylor Swift is at 128, and Bruno Mars 135. It's like, see ya, schlubs.
You're you're climbing. You sure are climbing up the list.
Yeah,
I
and
wonder
to
how that
make it,
feels. I mean, you have to put a lot of affection and kind of that blood, sweat, and tears, right? And when you create anything, I just think creating is a really hard thing to do, right? That's why I'm focused on this on the podcast because I think when you create, you put a little piece of yourself out into the world, right? And you say, "Here, now judge me," right? Like here, and you're going to get people who are going to come back and say, negative things about the work you've done, and you have to have a thick skin. And you saw there's the accolades too. Um, and most people I know that create couldn't imagine a life without creating. Right. So I think that's just a hard thing to do. Now, you create this piece of music that you fall in love with. You're excited to be working with Ellis Hall to do it. You put it out into the world and say, okay, will they love it? Will they hate it? And now it's it's climbing its way up. Like you said, it's in the top 200 list and it's making its way gradually up and up. What does that feel like?
for us, we're fairly ecstatic about all that because so much of what you do, if you make really worthwhile music with a lot of meat on the bone, and Ellis is not capable of not making, and me too. We want to hear a lot of really cool harmony like Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder wrote. We want to have all 5 octaves of Ellis's voice on there. We want a super funky bass line and so forth. But often we make that stuff and we have this sensation that, yeah, there's only a few people who are going to get it. So when it actually does get out in the world, and I got to give a little props to our killer radio man, Ray Hale, who just did an unbelievable job of promoting us to radio. But when it actually gets out there and you start to figure out that oh, people are really resonating with this, the disc jockeys that are playing it, we're closing in on 40,000 spins on radio. And before we released it, if you had told me we got 400, I would have been thrilled with that. Oh, that's so great. We we stuck the landing or whatever. But 40,000 and it's still going strong. That's pretty amazing. So compared to our expectations, which are that we're going to make it, it's going to be great, there's going to be a niche audience for it, but it's not going to ever make the top 500 radio list, let alone the top 200. We're thrilled with it, and we have another single coming up behind this one called "Some Days Were Meant for Rain," with a beautiful ballad that Ellis wrote. And, we did the same thing with that one, like left nothing on the floor with that one. Beautiful, harmony, bass line, Ellis's peerless vocals, great kind of soul bass lines and stuff like that. So, you know, that'll be number two. The record drops next Friday on February 14th. And we're hoping to have a similar kind of pickup of that one as we had with Die Living.
So what does the creative process look like for you, right? You and Alice want to create something together. What does that look like? I mean, are you just sitting around in a room together? Are you shipping stuff back and forth? I mean, do you get your best ideas when you're jogging? I mean, what's the process?
Well, the funny thing is, I bet if Ellis and I sat down to write something together from scratch, we'd have something great in a couple hours. For me, Die Living came to me when I was in the supermarket. That just those two words, and I thought, you know what? I bet I could make a song out of that. And we were still looking for a couple more songs for this CD. So I came home, got a little beat going, and within about 2 hours, it basically sounded like it does on the record, except it was me croaking out the vocals instead of Ellis's masterpiece vocal tracks. So I worked it up for about a minute and a half. I'm not a great lyricist, but I did have the gist of it. was that it's me and Ellis, we're no spring chickens anymore. And you start to think about the arc of your life, and we're asking various people that are in our lives to give us their take on how to live our best life until the end. Not in any morbid sense, but just how to go out rocking. So it starts out with, us asking kind of an old man, you know, what advice do you have for us? Because I want to die living. And boy, that shaped up super quick. And, I wanted to write a super simple song, this one. We have a lot of very sophisticated things on this that have beautiful jazz harmony and stuff like that. But as I put it to Ellis on this one, I wanted kind of just a front porch kind of, guitar, a guy playing an upside down wash can, and me on a Moog bass. But uh, and sent it to Ellis, and he loved it. Started to work on the vocals. I sent it to him. He kind of touched up some of the vocals, the lyrics, and improved them. And that one came together shockingly quickly, as the best ones do. If it kind of tumbles out of you, you've got a winner. The more you have to labor in the weeds on it. If I find myself in that position, I just stop. And, I'll be in the shower the next morning. It's like, you know what, that spot where I was stuck, this is what I'm going to do. But all the writing that I did for the soap operas, I wrote probably 300 pieces of music for that. By the time you've written that much, writer's block is a dead issue. You've got so many places to go, so much resources that something's going to come tumbling out of you. And maybe the next morning you're like, I liked the second half of that 20-second snippet of music, but I'm going to improve the first half. And you just don't get stuck anymore. I was the ultimate writer's block guy until I got that gig where I was making 65 bucks a minute for every minute of my music they used on the show. So it was a volume, volume, volume thing. Don't get so precious with each cue, don't get bogged down. So it's funny the way that life will teach you what you need to know if you just kind of keep saying yes to things.
Well, do you think that this is sort of the most fulfilled you've been in your career so far, in your music career?
In a lot of ways, yes, because
Because it sounds that way, right? It
this
sounds like
this
you've just hit this collaboration that you're
yeah,
over the
and it's
moon
a
about.
match made in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, Ellis is just a font of creativity. Just if you pick up the phone and call him, he's gonna sing hello to you in a way that just makes you weep. So super fun to bounce things off of him. Always on the same page with what this thing should sound like and what what it at its peak would be. So, it's great to have a record out. I have more composition on this record than I think I've ever had on anything but a trio record that I made myself 10 years ago. Um, so that's going great. I've got a lot of touring work coming up with really great artists that I respect. My kids are kicking it in college, and yeah, I'm really in quite great shape, I have to say.
Like when you were young, did you take music lessons? I mean, did that how you started, I assume, like a little boy at the piano kind of thing, or
Yeah, and I was a reluctant little boy at the piano. I wasn't really into it. I started out taking lessons for about a year from a nun at the Catholic grade school I was going to in Coos Bay. And then my mother was very driven that we wouldn't just go slog through piano lessons. So she found this extraordinary lady named Norma Lyons. She seemed like she was about 120 years old to me, and I was, 7. And she was missing a bunch of fingers, which was another, you know, layer of weirdness to the whole thing. I don't even know what happened. I think frostbite or something like that. And she was just like, the hell with it. I'm just gonna, I got six fingers. I'm gonna play the six best notes. And she was a great classical pianist that was just undeterred by the fact that she was missing these fingers.
Wow.
But she was super fun to work with. My sister and I would go out to take lessons with her. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold going. And for the last 5 or 10 minutes of the lesson, she would just jam on the piano and she'd have us pick up percussion instruments and play the tambourine and stuff like that. And it was fun. And then from her, I went to another very good uh, lady with a bun in the back of her head named Margaret McCoy. And throughout all of this, these people, despite the fact that I didn't like to practice, they were giving me a very good technique and like a pretty good understanding of music. And by the time I finally decided that I wanted to be a rock star instead of a scuba diver when I was like 13 or something, I could play the piano quite well. I always had an aptitude for it, but I was always the kind of person that if my mom left to run an errand, I would set the egg timer, forward some. Sorry, mom. Uh, but yeah, so, and then, when I really started to get into jazz, that's a whole other level of musicianship because you have to create it on the spot instead of figure out how to read it off a page.
I mean, you're obviously passionate about it, right? And most of the people that I've interviewed that have that excitement or that passion, it's something they've been working at since they were young, right? That they took lessons when they were a kid or they started writing
Right.
stories when they were like 4 or 5. That's the sort of thing that I think sits with you forever, right? When you're just kind of called to create something. And it's just the few blessed that I think get the opportunity to actually do that across their lifetime, to actually earn their living that way. Um,
Yeah, it's an interesting mix of neuroses in some ways. Most of the musicians I know who are really great players had a serious drive for it that wasn't necessarily a healthy one. It was like an effort to validate themselves by getting to the pinnacle of the world on the saxophone or the piano or what have you.
Sort of
There's a great,
obsessive, right?
yeah, it makes you obsessive because all your self-esteem, your whole self-image rests, and I was like this, on getting to where you play as well. In my case, it was a particular pianist named George Duke. And I wanted to be able to play as soulfully as George Duke and Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and Keith Jarrett. And I could go on and on. But so when I got to the Berklee College of Music, there was 2,500 kids or 2,000 kids there, and 90+% of them were just on vacation from reality. But there was 150 of us that were like, I got to make this work. And some it was just they were so ridiculously talented. There was this great pianist from Japan named Makoto Ozone, who I don't know if I practiced the rest of my life if I could sound like that kid did when he was 18 years old. But for a lot of us, it took a kind of determination and a drive that maybe was healthy because we wanted to excel and make the best of ourselves, or maybe it's that we were fleeing from the our insecurities and trying to, you know, get a some tangible medal of achievement or something. And it's funny how many musicians, if I open up that conversation with them, they'll say, "Yeah, that was me." I mean, a well-known saxophonist that I worked with said that he became the saxophonist that he became because it was the best way to reach his father, which,
Really?
yeah, and that's more common than you think. I know other people, I think Ellis is someone who just started touching the piano and it was such a thrill for him that his motivation, Herbie Hancock too, super ultra talented people that seemed like maybe it was kind of born more of a positive origin. I would put it that way, maybe. There's a great quote from a saxophonist named Jackie McLean who says about a career playing music, he says, you should only do this if you have to. Because there was a lot of lean years for me and for most of the people I know. And now they kind of translate as funny stories. But when I do clinics and so forth, for colleges and music high schools around the world, I ask people to raise their hands if they're considering a career at this. And, there's always people who raise their hands, and I tell them only the maniacs are going to make it. You know, the suits are always finding ways to
Yeah.
deplete our sources of income. So unless you're the very best, the most maniacal, the most driven, you should think about whether this weird, difficult lifestyle is for you. And when I was their age, it was 10 times easier to make a living at this. Everyone had live bands at their weddings, and there was tons of clubs that paid okay. The whole time I lived in New York City, I never went out to find work. The phone would ring, I would say yes, I would do good work, I'd get paid. It's different now.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I mean, I think your field, the field of music, is a really hard career to make. I agree with you. I do think it's something nobody falls into it, right? Nobody's just like, well, I really wanted to be something else, and then when I was, 21, I just.
Yeah, it tends to work the other way. I really intended to be a musician, but now I'm managing a laundromat
Exactly,
or
exactly.
whatever. It can be super helpful to have some kind of other income that's not related to the music business.
Sure.
Yeah,
And I think also there's something to be said for working behind the scenes, to be the tech people, right? Who do yeah.
I do a lot of that. I mix records, I master records, I do a lot of teaching. Being diversified is really the key thing, having six different income streams.
Sure. I mean,
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think there's that. And I also think there's, just the variety of having your hand in a number of things. That of course ages well, right? I mean, it's very
yeah,
hard to be, um, even if you're a rock star, it's hard to be enough of a rock star to carry yourself across your whole life,
right.
with a high income that people still want to see you, maybe touring, as you're aging. I think only the very, very cream of the crop maybe floats to the top and gets to do that. But for the most part, it's not necessarily a reflection of talent. And that's what sort of saddens me, right? Because I've known people who were more talented than other people who became, let's say, the cream of the crop, but don't have the same accolades to show for it.
Right.
And then, I mean, it's always sad. There doesn't ever seem to be a method to that madness, something that you can tangibly touch and go, oh, because X. It really is to a certain degree, about being in the right place at the right time, or some kind of luck, really, that you fall into that somebody else didn't. It's a blessing. For whatever reason, you were blessed to get through that door.
It's funny. I always tell the kids when I'm doing these clinics, I've only turned down less than 10 gigs in my entire life. Um, and the phone would ring. I'd say yes. I would meet somebody new. 5 years later, the phone would ring, and that somebody new had recommended me for this thing. Most of the good connections that I made when I lived in New York were made with my wedding band, which was not your father's Oldsmobile wedding band. We had Buddy Rich's alto player in there. We had the guy who replaced Luther Vandross in Change was the singer. Chuck Mangioni's drummer played drums. George Benson's bass player. But people would rotate through that. And the guy who actually put me on on the map as a electric jazz guy was Joel Rosenblatt, who was Spyro Gyra's drummer later. I think he might have been even at that time. And he recommended me to Ileana Elias, this great pianist, who recommended me to her husband at the time, Randy Brecker. And you keep meeting people, you keep doing good work. My son is now a student at USC's music production school, which is a very selective thing. And he's working, he's doing a lot of mixing for people and stuff like that. And he already knows this, but I always tell him, like, burn that midnight oil and make sure that everything you do makes people's jaws drop. And people will figure it out.
But let's talk about the album. You said it drops the 14th,
Yeah,
Valentine's Day. A great
that's right.
present. A great present.
If everyone could stream it 20 million times on Valentine's Day, that would be great.
And let's talk about the album. Okay, so um what's your favorite song on the album?
Um, it might be, it's either Some Days Were Meant for Rain, which is
The
this,
song Ellis wrote, you said.
that's right. And he actually recorded it with Tower of Power back in the day. So, when I get a mission like that, it's like, okay, that was a great version. What are we going to do to make this a fresh take on it? But Ellis's vocals, the way that the arrangement is beautiful and open, and the message of it's just a classic hook. Some days were meant for rain. And then there's a tune that I wrote most of in the 90s called Own Up. And I originally wrote it because it looked like I might have a way to get a tune to Whitney Houston. And it would have been perfect for her. People have heard it on this record and said, gee, that would have been a great Whitney tune. And I'm like, no kidding. And that's kind of like a fast, funky tune about someone asking their partner to own up that there's something going on. Um, and I love the way that turned out. I love playing synthesizer bass, and that one's got a really great synthesizer bass line. And Ellis is in full flight on that one. So I like that one too. Um, Let me think. There's what the record opens with a track called Soul Street. And that's just a good boogie tune of Ellis's from back in the day. And we did that live in the studio with our guitarist and executive producer, David Ford. We got Armand Sabaleko, who's the guy who did all those huge Paul Simon tours in the 90s, the Rhythm of the Saints tour and the Graceland tour. Incredibly great musician from Cameroon. And we got Aaron Haggerty, who's been playing with the Earth, Wind, and Fire Experience and Kool and the Gang and stuff like this. And we just banged that out in the studio, and it was super funky and super fun. It didn't need any digital surgery on the other side. We just played it great and mixed it. And that was just a super fun recording day that day. So those are kind of some of my favorites. I love everything on the record, though. We wouldn't stop if we didn't love it by the time it was done. So,
So tell everybody, one, where they can get more information about you and Ellis and the band that you formed, and two, where they can buy the record.
well, the best place to get info on us is on our Instagram, which is Whitty Hall Artist Team. WHITTYHALL Artist Team, all one word. Because we're always putting out bulletins about what's coming up. There will be a link to this podcast on there, for example, and information about the release is coming out there. We also, if you go to whittyhall.com, that's our website. That's not updated as frequently. We also have a presence on Facebook. The record will be available on every streaming service. So whether you're a Spotify person or an Apple Music person, the best one is Tidal because they pay us like 4 times as much per stream as Spotify does. But anywhere that you stream your music, it's what with four extent exclamation points. Ellis refused to consider any fewer than four exclamation points. So I think we're probably the only band that ever had four exclamation points in there. And of course, that stands for Whitty Hall Artist Team. Um, and yeah, we're hoping to get, you know, really get the streaming ball rolling once the full thing is released.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'm really looking forward to it. I liked the song "Die Living" very much. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, it's the only one I'm familiar with so far, really, from the two of you. That's the only one I've been able to listen to. But I'm excited for the whole album to drop. I'm really excited about this new song, because you know what? Some days you want to hear a song like that. Some days are meant for nothing but rain.
Right. You know, to me, that one feels a little bit, you know, I'm a huge Luther Vandross
Oh
fan.
yeah.
I don't feel like there was ever anybody that sang ballads like that. And when he passed away, it feels like there's been a little bit of a void for those big, beautiful, lush Marcus Miller production, you know, killer ballads. And that's sort of the hole that Some Days Were Meant for Rain fills.
Well, I'm super excited to be able to listen to it. I will be streaming it on the 14th. We'll put the link.
Again, shooting for 20 million per person. Ellis and I like to joke that we can afford the senior special at Denny's if we stream 20 million.
Well, I'll be streaming, and
Great.
I will put the link up for anybody who wants to have a listen. Definitely quality, quality. And
Excellent. I can send you an email with the links to us on Spotify and Apple Music. And I'm also going to send you a private link you know, you can listen to the whole record and watch the videos on there just so that you get a feel for what's coming.
oh, I'm excited already.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. And I'm going to close the podcast out, but I hope before I do, I want to invite you back. I hope as you're continuing to create more music, that you'll come back again and keep talking to me about it.
absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you. So I'll
Great.
say, have a nice day, everybody.
Have a nice day, everybody.